He said I was too little for his world, but he didn't expect the last dance. I used to think you could measure love in steps. Slow, slow, quick, quick, slow. The way to bodies find the same beat and trust each other not to let go. Turns out, you can also measure contempt that way, one small stumble at a time. So gentle you don't notice until you're on the floor, staring up at a hand that doesn't reach back. My name is Laya. I teach tango in a coastal town that smells like salt and lemon blossoms and, by August, hums with cicadas and tourists. People come here to fall in love with the sea, or with themselves, or with the idea of a life they'll never live. Luca came for photos. He stayed for me, or that's what he said. He showed up to my beginner class with a camera strap across his chest and expensive sneakers that squeaked on the stone tiles. Just for fun, he said, offering that crooked grin people mistake for sincerity. He was the kind of man who made everything look easy, ordering wine without reading the list, learning the basic ocho in 2 tries, taking photos of a doorway and making it look like a secret. When he asked if I'd show him the town, the hidden courtyards, the little bakery that burns the bottoms of their cornetti, he said it like he was asking for the time. We started walking. We kept walking. Nights turned into long laps around the piazza, my sandals tapping, his camera clicking, our shoulders occasionally brushing like accidental promises. I didn't mind that he was always passing through, because with him, even passing felt like a destination. He liked that I knew everyone. I liked that he knew everywhere. He said my world was warm. I said his was wide. We called it balance. There were small things, even then. The way he'd joke that my town was a beautiful postcard, like real life happened somewhere airplanes could find. The way he'd crop me out of photos to focus on the light. The way he'd say you wouldn't understand when I asked about the cities he loved. None of it was cruel. Not exactly. It was like a dancer who keeps you a fraction too far from his frame, close enough to move, not close enough to trust. By mid-August, the festival lanterns went up, a beaded necklace of light around the square. The organizers asked me to perform. On the final night, our town's pride, the traditional tango under the stars. It's the one time of year when the music hushes, even the tourists. Last year, a video of it went viral. This year, sponsors were live streaming it. Come on, Luca said when I told him. We should dance together. It'll be romantic. He said it like a man planning a photo, not a memory. I laughed it off at first. He had the legs for it, sure, but not the discipline. Tango is an argument disguised as a hug. People think it's about who leads, but it's really about who listens. Still, when he looked at me like a challenge, I heard myself say yes. I started rehearsing with him after class, counting in whispers while the square emptied. 1, 2, 3. He'd miss a weight change and laugh. I'd forgive it and adjust. That's the thing about being a teacher. You build your steps around other people's mistakes. He began making comments about after the festival. Milan, Lisbon, maybe Buenos Aires in the winter. He said it like weather, impersonal. He'd slide his phone across the table to show me flights. You could come, he'd say, and I'd picture my studio with the lights off and the mirrors gathering dust. Or, he'd add, we could do long distance. You love this place. I get it. The way he said love made it sound small enough to fit in a pocket. I told myself I didn't need grand statements. He stayed, he rehearsed. He took photos of my hands on the piano when I tuned the speakers and of my hair falling out of its bun. When I laughed, he caught me mid-spin on the empty square and showed me the frame. And for a second I saw myself the way he did, weightless, luminous, a bright thing in a small sky. I saved that feeling like a coin under my tongue. The night it broke was a rooftop party, one of those end-of-summer things where the Prosecco tastes like bubbles and the music leaks into the street. The sea was a black ribbon below us. I left. Luca talking with people he knew from the city, which is how he said it, like it was a country and this was the province. I was heading back from the stairwell with a bottle of water when I heard his laugh, low and theatrical, the one he uses when he's framing a story. "Come on," he said. "She's sweet. She teaches dance. It's cute. But my world, it's bigger. She's too little for that. Not forever material, you know?" I stopped. Water sloshed up the neck of the bottle and wet my hand. Someone asked, "So it's just for the summer?" He didn't answer right away. I could picture the shrug without seeing it. "It's good for now," he said. "It fits here, like a pair of shoes you don't pack." A breeze pushed a paper lantern into the air. It bobbed once and settled. I didn't move. I thought about all the moments I had filed under teasing and style and just how he is. I thought about the way he'd stepped a beat ahead of me that afternoon and assumed I would follow. I thought, very quietly, that a last dance can look like many things. When I finally walked out onto the terrace, I smiled. I put the bottle down, kissed him on the cheek, and asked if he was ready to rehearse tomorrow. He grinned like I'd proven a point. "Good," I said, taking my hand back, "because I'm done being too little." He didn't hear me over the music. Or maybe he did and mistook it for a lyric. Either way, the festival had already chosen. A theme, the square, was waiting. And I had just found the beat. We met in June, when the heat had just started pressing the smell of jasmine into the air and the sea was still cold enough to make you gasp. Luca came to my first Tuesday evening, class of the season late, carrying a half-melted gelato and a camera bag. He smiled like he already knew the steps and was just being polite by showing up. "Do I need special shoes?" he asked. "You need socks without holes," I said. He laughed like I'd given him the answer to something much bigger. He moved. Well, I'll give him that. Not with the discipline of a trained dancer, but with the confidence of someone who assumed the floor would catch him. By the end of class, he'd managed a half-decent salida and earned himself an espresso invitation from the older ladies in the group, a badge of acceptance around here. From then on, he was everywhere, turning up outside my studio with 2 paper cups of cappuccino, claiming he just happened to be passing by with his camera, waiting at the edge of the beach after my morning swim, joining me at the bakery before I opened for lessons. He was easy company, like a song you hum without noticing. We didn't need to define anything. The rhythm defined itself. He'd photograph fishermen mending their nets in the harbor, while I corrected a student's posture. I'd find him perched on a low wall, watching me cross the square, and he'd hop down to take my bag before I reached him. It was the sort of closeness that makes you think there's no seam between 2 lives, just a single fabric. We had our rituals, the Thursday night gelato from the shop with the unreliable freezer, the Sunday ferry to the little island where the cafe owner knew to bring us coffee without asking, the evening walks where he'd spin me in the middle of a quiet street, no music except the shuffle of our feet. If there were cracks, they looked like quirks. He teased me about knowing everyone in town. I teased him about knowing no one for more than a month. When he complained that the town closed too early at night, I counted that the stars stayed open all the time. We thought we were meeting in the middle. I didn't notice then how much of our world bent toward him. The day trips, his idea. The photos we took together, on his camera, edited his way. The stories we told about how we met. His version, always trimmed for punchlines. I thought it was charm. Now I know charm can be a leash you barely feel. One evening in July, after a street performance, we sat on the seawall watching the fishing boats come in. He showed me pictures on his phone, a skyline in Morocco, a night market in Hanoi, a glacier glowing under the northern lights. "You should see all this," he said. "I'd like to," I said. "You'd love it," he agreed. For a little while, the way he said it made me feel small, like a candle in daylight. I told myself I was imagining it. The next day, he brought flowers to the studio just because, and I decided to stop thinking so hard. But the inconsistencies started stacking, quiet as shells on the beach. A phone call he took outside during dinner, his voice low and hurried. A weekend trip to Naples to buy equipment that somehow produced no new gear, just a faint smell of perfume I didn't recognize. The smallest one stuck. We were looking through his camera roll one afternoon when I saw a photo of a woman I didn't know, long dark hair, red dress, leaning against a balcony railing with the Naples skyline behind her. "Who's that?" I asked. "Just someone I met while shooting," he said, swiping past before I could look again. "You wouldn't know her." It wasn't the answer that stayed with me. It was the way his hand moved, quick, almost rehearsed. Like this wasn't the first time he'd hidden something behind his smile. The first whisper came from Julia, one of my longest-standing students. The kind who stays after class to help stack chairs and always pretends she isn't telling you something important. "I saw Luca at the station yesterday," she said, casually, balancing a chair on one hip. "He was with someone, not from here." I smiled like it was a funny coincidence. Maybe one of his photography friends. She gave me that look people give when they know you're lying to yourself. "Maybe," she said, then left it there, the word hanging like the last note of a song. The thing about a small town is nothing stays private, not even the things you wish were. By the next week, the whispers had started looping back to me. From other mouths. Someone saw him getting into a taxi in Naples. Someone else claimed they'd spotted him having dinner with a woman in a scarlet dress. One rumor even had them kissing in the shadow of the Galleria. I tried to file them away as noise, the same way I ignored talk about which baker watered down his dough or whose cousin was feuding with the mayor. But these whispers had a pulse, and it matched the one in my throat. Luca didn't help. He came to rehearsal smiling like nothing had changed, spinning me in lazy circles, dipping me just enough to brush my hair against the floor. His eyes were the same warm brown. His hands still found my waist like they belonged there. But I started noticing the gaps between his visits, the way his phone stayed face down on the table, the sudden trips for a shoot that stretched longer than they should have. One night, after closing the studio, I was walking home when I heard laughter spilling from the bar at the end of the street. Inside, a group of tourists were showing each other something on a phone, their heads bent. Together, I caught a glimpse as I passed a short video of Luca, unmistakable even in grainy light, clinking glasses with a woman in that same red dress. The caption read, "Napoli Nights." I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. But I felt something shift under my ribs, like the floor had tilted and I was the only one who noticed. A few days later, I got my confirmation without asking for it. Luca had left his backpack at my place after rehearsal. While tidying up, I noticed the zipper half open. Inside was a folded receipt from a Naples hotel to nights. One room, double occupancy. It wasn't the paper itself that cut me. It was the precision, the neat fold, the way it sat on top of his things, like it had been placed there deliberately. Like a souvenir he didn't care if I found. When I handed the bag back to him the next day, I didn't mention it. I didn't ask who she was or why the dates matched the days he'd said he was shooting fishermen at dawn. Instead, I smiled, kissed his cheek, and told him we should rehearse extra hours this week, because by then I'd already decided. It wasn't going to end with an argument in my kitchen or a tearful goodbye on the seawall. It was going to end on the square, under the lanterns, in front of the whole town. And he was going to see what too little looked like when it took up the whole stage. I didn't have to wait long for him to hand me the truth himself. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind where the air felt soft enough to press your cheek. Class had just ended, and the last of my students drifted out into the street. Luca lingered, leaning against the mirrored wall like he owned the reflection. "Big night Saturday," he said, grinning. "You ready to make the crowd fall in love with us?" Us. The word lodged in my chest like a pit. I thought of the hotel. Receipt of the red dress in Naples, of Julia's careful voice when she'd said, "Not from here." So I tried something. I asked him, point blank, "Who's the woman in the balcony photo?" His smile didn't falter, not immediately, but a small twitch passed over his face, the way a cat's ear flicks at a sudden noise. "Just someone I met while shooting," he said. "She's interesting. Interesting enough to share." "A hotel room with?" I asked. My voice was calm, my arms loose at my sides. I could have been asking about the weather. He chuckled, that dismissive kind of laugh people use when they want to make you feel childish. "You're reading too much into things, liar. We're just different. You have your world here, I have mine out there." "I see," I said. "And you're sweet," he went on, as if this was a kindness. "But you're not," he hesitated, searching for the word. "You're not forever material for me. That's not an insult, just reality. You're too little for my world." Too little. It wasn't even the cruelty that stung. It was the way he said it with such casual authority, as if he'd been quietly measuring me for months and had just decided to hand over the report. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't even leave right away. I smiled, stepped closer, and kissed him lightly on the cheek. "Well," I said, "then let's make this last dance one to remember." He took it as an olive branch, not a warning. "That's the spirit," he said, giving me that easy grin. That night, while he went back to his rented flat, I stayed in the studio. I turned on the music, dimmed the lights, and let my feet trace patterns on the floor until the steps came without thought. In my mind, I began to choreograph not just a dance, but a reckoning. The plan grew in silence. First, I confirmed the performance would be live-streamed again this year. The festival's social media accounts had already announced it. Then I made a quiet call to an old friend, Marco, a professional dancer who'd grown up here and happened to be visiting. Family. He owed me a favor, and when I told him what I needed, he didn't even ask why. We rehearsed at night, in the closed cafe on the edge of the square. Marco moved the way I wished Luca had, not just guiding me, but listening, adjusting, letting. The music passed through us both. Each turn, each lift, each final pause was calculated to speak without words. By day, I smiled at Luca and let him believe everything was fine. We rehearsed our safe, simple routine for the festival. Spins, a dip, a flourish at the end. I corrected his steps with a teacher's patience. I let him think I was still bending myself to his rhythm. But the real choreography, The one with the fire, the sharp stops, the breathless runs. That was for Marco. That was for the crowd. That was for the camera catching every step and sending it out into the world. Luca thought I was too small to belong to. When the festival committee handed me the running order, I asked, sweet as honey, if we could make a small, last-minute change. My partner had been injured, I explained, but I'd found a replacement. It was important, I said, that the dance go on. The organizer raised an eyebrow, then nodded. The square would be full. The show must go on. By the time Saturday night arrived, Luca still believed he'd be stepping into the lantern light with me, that this was our big romantic goodbye. He had no idea he'd already been replaced. The thing about masks is, if you've worn enough stage makeup, you know how to make them believable. A little smile here, a tilt of the head there. Let them see what they want to see and nothing more. For the 3 days before the festival, I became the version of me Luca liked best, agreeable, amused by his stories, eager to make our performance perfect. If he noticed that I didn't correct his steps as much, or that my eyes drifted past him sometimes, he didn't mention it. He was too busy picturing himself center stage. I kept our rehearsals light. Don't strain your ankle, I'd say. We need you strong for the big night. The words tasted sweet and sharp, like candied lemon peel. He took them as care. I meant them as countdown. Meanwhile, Marco and I were rehearsing in secret. The cafe owner gave us the keys after closing. We pushed the tables back, rolled out a portable speaker, and danced until our clothes were damp and the windows fogged. This wasn't the simple routine Luca knew. This was tango with teeth. Sudden drops into stillness, the snap of a leg against mine, the kind of turns that make the crowd gasp, because they don't know if you'll come out of them upright. Marco understood without my explaining that. This wasn't just a dance, it was a message. Every pause was a sentence. Every sharp pivot was punctuation. The final pose, his arm wrapped low around my waist, my head thrown back, eyes straight to the audience, was the period at the end of the story. I told no one else. Not my students, not Julia, not even my sister. I wanted the reveal to land without warning. I wanted people to remember the moment the music started and something in the air changed. On the afternoon before the festival, I delivered the injury news to the organizers. I told them Luca had twisted his ankle in practice and I'd found a stand-in. I showed them Marco's portfolio, grainy phone videos from international competitions, and framed it as a lucky turn. The director, busy juggling sound checks and lighting cues, didn't ask questions. He just nodded and scribbled the change on the running sheet. That night, Luca and I had dinner at a little trattoria near the sea. He talked about the festival like it was the highlight of his summer, his grand farewell before moving on. I smiled and asked him which city he'd photograph next. He said maybe Lisbon, maybe Marrakesh, maybe wherever opportunities took him. He asked if I'd consider visiting. I'm not sure, I said, swirling my wine. I like it here. He smirked, like that was the punchline to an old joke. Of course you do. I tucked the smirk away in my mind. Tomorrow night, I'd take it from him. The morning of the festival, the square transformed. Crews strung lanterns from balcony to balcony. Vendors set up carts, spilling over with olives and fresh bread. The stage at the center gleamed under the first test of the spotlights. Tourists leaned from windows with cameras in hand. The air smelled of salt and frying dough. I saw Luca from across the square, laughing with a group of photographers. He waved when he spotted me, but didn't cross over. I didn't mind. I wasn't looking for him anymore. That evening, just before the show, I found him backstage. He was wearing the shirt I'd once said made him look like a matador. He grinned and asked if I was ready. "Oh, I'm ready," I said, adjusting the strap of my dress. He didn't. Noticed that Marco was already waiting in the wings, hidden behind a stack of props. He didn't notice that my heels were sharper than the ones I wore for practice. He didn't notice the small crowd of my students gathered in the front row, or that the festival's livestream camera was trained dead center on the dance floor. The MC's voice boomed over the speakers, announcing my name. And my special partner for the evening, Lucas' grin faltered. Marco stepped into the light. The applause began, slow and curious, like the first roll of distant thunder. The lights were hot on my shoulders, and the square held its breath. The air smelled of fried dough and jasmine, but beneath it was that electric scent of an audience waiting for something they can't name yet. Marco took my hand. His palm was warm, steady. He didn't need to say anything. Our bodies had already had the conversation in the cafe, night after night. We stepped forward together, the crowd's applause swelling and breaking against us. I could see Luca in the shadows at stage left, frozen mid-step, his expression caught somewhere between confusion and offense. The first notes of the tango curled into the square, low, dangerous, like a secret you shouldn't tell. Marco led me into the opening sequence, and we moved as one. The sound of our steps against the stage was sharp, deliberate. The kind of precision you can't fake. The kind that says we've been here before. Gasps rippled through the front rows as Marco dipped me deep on the first chorus, holding me just a breath longer than polite. I stared out into the audience, not at him, letting my gaze pass over the crowd until it found Luca. He was still there, still watching. I didn't blink. Every move was a word, every pause a sentence. The sharp pivots were the nights I'd waited for him to come home. The quick leg flicks were the rumors I'd pretended not to hear. The long, anchored stillnesses were the way I'd decided, quietly, to stop letting him lead. When Marco spun me into the traveling turn, my skirt flared wide, catching the light. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew the livestream camera was eating it up, every flash of color, every sudden stillness. People at home would feel it too, even if they didn't know the story. Halfway through, Marco caught me out of a backstep and pulled me in so close I could hear his heartbeat. The crowd roared at the intimacy, but I knew it was a different kind of closeness, a shared aim, not a shared life. We built the tension like a storm. The music climbed, the steps quickened, and then silence, that perfect tango pause, the one that makes everyone hold their breath because they don't know where you'll land next. I turned my head in that pause, just enough to see Luca clearly. His arms were crossed now, his jaw tight. Someone beside him leaned in and said something, and I caught the flicker of a smirk on their face. Good, let him feel it in the bone. The final sequence was fire. Marco lifted me just high enough for the crowd to erupt, set me down with a snap, and guided me into the last pose. My back arched, one leg hooked round his, my arm outstretched toward the audience as my head tipped back. The square exploded in applause, whistles cutting through the humid night air. Somewhere, I could hear the faint buzz of the livestream drone moving in for a close-up. I kept my chest open, my body still, the perfect picture for 1,000 paused videos. We held the pose. 1 second, 2, long enough for everyone in that square and everyone watching from behind their screens to understand this was not Luca's dance. It never had been. When we finally straightened, Marco kissed my hand, and I turned to the crowd with a smile that tasted like victory. From the corner of my eye, I saw Luca turn and walk away, swallowed by the shadows beyond the stage. He didn't look back good. Neither did I. The music faded, but the clapping didn't. People surged forward to congratulate us, and cameras flashed like fireworks. Someone shouted my name, and for the first time all summer, I felt taller than the stage beneath my feet. The trap had closed, and the best part, he'd walked right into it himself. The night air was thick with music, sweat, and applause. People spilled into the square like water breaking a dam, all of them talking at once about the dance, about the twist of me walking past Luca into Marco's arms, about the way the performance had looked on the big screen set up for the festival. I caught fragments of it as I moved through the crowd. Did you see her face when she looked at him? Marco came out of nowhere. I swear he just stood there like an idiot. The words bounced around me, each one landing exactly where I wanted them to. By the time I left the stage, my phone was already buzzing. My students had clipped the last 30 seconds of the dance and posted it with a caption, "The Queen of the Square." The video was spreading fast, not just among locals, but in the festival's hashtag feed, which was being followed by thousands of viewers around the world. Luca didn't come to find me afterward. I heard from someone backstage that he'd slipped out just before the finale, shoving his way through the crowd. His absence was louder than his presence would have been. People noticed. They always do when the main character walks out before the credits. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I regretted anything, I didn't, but because my phone wouldn't stop lighting up. Friends from other towns were messaging me links to articles already going up on small travel blogs about the unforgettable closing performance. Strangers were tagging me in slowed-down clips of my final pose with Marco. A few even called it the breakup dance, though they couldn't have known the truth. The next morning, the gossip tightened its circle. The whispers weren't whispers anymore. Tourists told the story in cafes as if they'd been part of it. Local kids reenacted my walk across the stage, exaggerating the moment I passed Luca by. By lunchtime, someone had posted a side-by-side, one photo of Luca waiting in the wings at the start, smiling, and another of him mid-step as Marco and I took the floor. The caption read, "Plot twist." I didn't share it, but I saved it. By the second day, even the Naples rumors had resurfaced, this time with sharper edges. People were openly speculating about the woman in the red dress, about whether she knew he'd been rehearsing with someone else. A mutual acquaintance told me she'd seen the two of them arguing outside a cafe in the city, voices raised. By the third day, Luca was gone. No announcement, no goodbyes, just an empty rental flat, and a set of keys dropped off with the landlord. Word was, he'd headed north, maybe to Milan. Some said the woman had left before him. Some said she'd never been more than a fling. No one seemed sure, but the dance stayed. It was still in the square, in the way people looked at me differently now. Not as the girl who teaches tango, but as someone who could set the whole town talking with a single choice. And it was online, too. The festival organizers leaned into the attention, posting the full performance on their page with the caption, "Art tells the truth you can't say out loud." The comments section was a mix of praise, speculation, and the kind of armchair detective work only strangers can do. I didn't correct anyone. I didn't need to. The beauty of a public fall is that once it starts rolling downhill, you don't have to push. Sometimes I wonder if Luke has seen the video, if he's ever scrolled past my face frozen mid-spin, the square roaring behind me, and felt that hot twist of knowing exactly what it meant. I hope so, because that night, under the lanterns, he learned something he'd never understood in all his travels, that even the smallest world can hold. A stage big enough to bury you. The festival ended, the lanterns came down, and the square went back to being just a square. The stage disappeared in a day, like it had never been there at all. But the echo of that night, the way the music wrapped around us, the gasp when Marco took my hand, stayed longer than the decorations ever could. For weeks, people kept bringing it up. In the bakery line, at the market, on my way to class, someone would stop me just to say they'd watched the video again, that it gave them chills, that they'd never forget the look on my face. A few even tried to get me to tell the real story behind it. I never did. I'd smile, say something vague like, every dance tells a story, and let them fill in the rest. It's amazing how quickly people will write the ending you want if you give them just enough to work with. The video took on a life of its own. First the festival's account, then local tourism pages, then a few random TikToks with captions. Like revenge, but make it art. The comments section became its own rumor mill. Strangers argued about whether the guy in the wings was my ex, my brother, my former dance partner. Someone claimed they knew the truth, but their version sounded like a soap opera, and no one could prove anything. I didn't need them. Marco went back to Rome a few days later. Before he left, he told me the square had never felt so alive. It wasn't just a performance, he said. It was a declaration. I think he meant it as a compliment, but it also sounded like a warning. Declarations can't be taken back. As for Luca, I never heard from him. Not a message, not a call, not even a lazy good luck text. Once or twice, I thought I saw him in passing, a tall man with a camera on his shoulder in a busy street. But when I blinked, it was always someone else. And maybe that's better. Not seeing him means he never gets to see me either. Not the version of me that grew in the space he left behind. I started teaching more classes, added a night course for beginners. I even got an offer to do a short residency in Rome next spring. Bigger stage, bigger audience. I haven't decided if I'll take it. Because the truth is, I'm not chasing a bigger world anymore. I've built one here, in the same streets he once called too small. And somehow it feels bigger than anything he ever offered. Still. Sometimes, late at night, when the streets are quiet and the air smells like the sea, I'll hear a faint echo of that music in my head. I'll remember the heat of the lights, the way the crowd roared when Marco spun me into that final pose, the way Luca froze at the edge of the stage, and I'll think, not about what I lost, but about what I took back, because some stages aren't just for dancing. Some are for telling the truth in a language the whole world understands, even if they don't know the words. Some say revenge brings no peace, but for her, it was the only way.